and welcome to episode 169 of our SAP-on-Azure Video Podcast. Today is November 22nd, and together with Robert and Goran, we are here to talk about anything related to SAP and Microsoft. Hello, everyone.
Hi.
So, hello. A lot of things are evolving in the world of AI at the moment. We just had a very crazy weekend, I would say, with OpenAI. However, one thing is more than stable: ABAP. In previous episodes, we already showed how you can use the AI SDK for ABAP to not only generate ABAP code with Azure OpenAI, but also easily implement prompts to solve programming challenges. We're actually working already with a few customers that have implemented the AI SDK for ABAP in their SAP systems. And one question that comes up from time to time is how to handle enterprise aspects when implementing the AI SDK for your SAP systems. For that, we have again Gopal Nair joining us, who will do a deep dive on the enterprise controls of the AI SDK for ABAP, which helps organizations to run the AI SDK in a controlled way. But before we hand over to him, as always, let's quickly take a look at some of the news from this week. And I think we have some nice announcements again. Goran, let's start again with
from a
infrastructure topics.
Yeah, we were mentioning last time about the new MV3 family for SAP, and actually just afterwards came the official blog about the MV3. Currently, it's in medium memory. Let's just try to remind. It's like 250 GB to 4 terabyte at the moment. Important is it's really showing a much faster performance compared to the MV2, for example. For the HANA during those loads tests. Of course, whatever it's released, it's certified for the SAP and for the HANA. And as well, it's definitely higher stability and reliability. Or much more improved, definitely, and much more improved than the networking and storage IOPS and throughput, which is a great news. As well, the premium SSD here, we can see it, and some pricing and for which kind of loads you can use. I mean, we also mentioned in the one of the last, we had a chat about the premium V2. Definitely, customers are warmly welcome to try because they are faster and cheaper, which is the ideal situation.
What else do you want?
Yes, what else do you want? And next is the blog from Cameron. Cameron is really their legend in Microsoft for the SAP, and he always, from time to time, he's giving this kind of general update and snapshot of what's news, where he also mentioned the MV3, the medium size exactly. He also talked about the AI, of course.
Look,
it's always
calls us out here.
Absolutely, so meaning, these are the SAP on Azure YouTube channel. Yeah, great, which is nice. On the Linux as well, he's giving some basically latest supported versions, and he also always have links to the either SAP or other news. As some news or an ACSS for automated deployment. He's emphasizing always SAP on Azure quality check tool, which is great, absolutely must have for every customer. Talking about 4K Oracle native storage. I mean, these look smaller detail, but actually extremely important for the good performance of the database and the SAP system as well.
And I think Cameron is also one of the champions of Oracle. I think he also knows the Oracle configuration inside out here.
We had this marathon with him, unplanned,
but really cool and really into the details.
Exactly, yes. And he is very much connected to the customer projects, so he really sees the problems and challenges. And when he emphasizes, is definitely a very quite important. Again, here is also, if RSS is working correctly, how to check it, for example, as well. Defender, he's also there quite active in order. He also wrote some blogs as well. They're definitely on a Defender for endpoint, also for the SAP system. Azure backup enhancement, PPG. Let's not go it's quite
a
quite
lot
a
of
lot.
content.
Azure Site Recovery, that's the last one. It's quite useful. It's a preview? Yeah, it's a private preview of Azure Site Recovery support for the shared disk on Windows, which is really cool stuff because the whole clustered essential services could be replicated with a shared disk to another site. That's really great news because the DR for that component of SAP system becomes very easy, or will become very easy to implement it. Yeah, and I think because M-Series for the mid-sized, it's kind of GA. However, this is also, there will be a higher size, which is currently Mark Rusinovic was showing on a last week conference. Super Mega Godzilla Beast he's showing here basically 30 terabyte VM, and also from the CPUs side, it's 1700, how much? 48 something CPU, which is 1792, which is crazy. It's just unbelievable crazy. And this is all the MV3, which will come, which will also come, and it's amazing. I mean, it's just, I always wonder who needs these kind of stuff, but HANA needs it. Yeah, so it's we are looking forward. Definitely, we will put the link on. It's a short part which is talking about the new top level MV3 VMs. Yeah,
really crazy. But that was one of the sessions during Ignite, during last week's Ignite.
Correct.
And I do want to call, so next on playing Pong on the task manager, which is one thing that you can do. There's also a session by Microsoft IT on how we are running SAP internally. So Frederick Huet and Ram, I forgot his last name, were presenting this session to where they're showing how SAP is how Microsoft is running SAP. And throughout this session, it was really a nice session. Like they highlighted a few things that we are doing within Microsoft, how we are doing telemetry, how we are doing here ACSS and a lot of scenarios there. And then also talking about AI. So how they are actually using in some extent the AI SDK for ABAP to generate code and stuff like that. So that was also really nice. And I think a beautiful tribute, Gopal, to the work that you are doing, that you have been doing here. So this was also showcased during Ignite. We will come back to this topic, obviously, but quickly to just continue the news. Martin Pankratz again published a really nice blog post. And actually, what I especially liked about this is after one of his previous blog posts where he talked about ABAP Cloud and what you can do there were some comments from the community like, okay, ABAP Cloud is nice, but where do I store my files now? And then there were some additional discussions, and Martin then said, okay, let's figure this out. And he really took a closer look, worked with lots of colleagues there to see how can we enable Azure Storage. And then you know Martin, he did a very nice analysis, checked what options are available, and then he said, let's take a look how this is done with Azure Blob. He looks at how to do the authentication against Azure Active or Entra ID now, so no longer Azure Active Directory. It's been renamed to Entra ID. And then how to save the files basically. So there's again a GitHub repo. There's this detailed blog post. So I think a really nice scenario again from him. And then
Martin
to just
is
close
a
it
blog
off,
machine.
He is a blog machine, absolutely. But to close it off, another colleague of ours, Amit Lal, he released an SAP-on-Azure Technical Copilot on OpenAI. So the idea is that Amit trained a Copilot with lots of data on SAP documentation, how to run an SAP system on Azure, some documents on the best practices and so on. And now, unfortunately, I don't have it, but if you are an ChatGPT Plus If you have a ChatGPT Plus subscription, then you can really test this SAP-on-Azure Technical Copilot from Amit directly here in ChatGPT. Good. So that was all. We're closing with AI, and actually you saw there is a lot of AI stuff happening, but that's a beautiful bridge, I think, to the AI SDK for ABAP. So remember, we had Gopal already on the show 2 times where he introduced the AI SDK, where he showed us what you can do with this, and now I'm really happy, Gopal, to have you back to continue the story here. But for those who might not have seen the first 2 episodes, maybe you can start by quickly introducing yourself, and then we'll go deep on the enterprise controls. Wait, you are still muted? I think.
Sorry.
Now it's better.
Now it works.
Thank you, Holger. Thank you, Goran, for having me back. And it's an absolute pleasure to talk to you back and also talk to all the audience. It's amazing. So today, so I'm a software engineer here in Microsoft, and as towards the beginning of this year, as AI kind of started taking off, one gap that we identified was there are libraries for Node.js, Python, and all those, but the poor ABAPers like us kind of like, was it was not at the top of it, right? But at the same time, we found out, SAP system is an enterprise system. It has its own challenges, but at the same time, it has a lot of data as well, which can benefit, and business processes which can benefit from potentially artificial intelligence being together. These 2 things kind of combined together, got the idea that, okay, we need a reliable, high quality library that can, interface with the AI engines out there, but not with but without much complexity, like, with the goal of still working in the ABAP domain, like, ABAPers, domain. That's how AI SDK was born. And thank you for having me in the show previous 2 times where we discussed about the basics of AI SDK, then how to kind of, last time we saw how chat completions or GPT-4 utilization was there, and then we generated some code, airport code, and so on and so forth. But and then glad to be back here for the 3rd session, which is enterprise control.
Perfect. Well, great to have you again.
Thank you. So today I was hoping we can talk about a very important aspect in any enterprise software, and that is the control mechanisms which protect the data that goes in, out, or the things that can be done with a software, with the governance of an organization, not just Microsoft, but any organization that uses the software. So AI SDK is not an exception. In fact, it's extremely important for organizations to kind of like govern with their policies, so that the artificial intelligence engine is exposed to only those data that they deem okay, or like, perform operations, because there is cost associated with it, there is data associated with it, so on and so forth, right? So there needs to be that confidence. And this is where the 3rd leg, and let me share my screen here.
Yeah, because while you do this, I think the cool thing, what the AI SDK allows you to do is it really empowers every ABAP developer to very easily consume AI services. But as you said, maybe there are some restrictions. Maybe there are cost restrictions where companies want to limit, want to restrict, like who can actually use it. And I think that's the beautiful thing here, where we have now these enterprise controls where I can control what is allowed. But let's see. Yeah.
Right. And there are different facets of this AI SDK, right? So as you can see, we are on the homepage of our documentation, and then if I go into the documentation, one thing I wanted to kind of call attention to is so here in the enterprise control, and we'll come back here. But if we look at the entire feature set of an artificial intelligence tool like AI SDK, a lot of these fine-tunes, file deployments, models, etc., they are all setup mechanisms. Think of it as a basis activity for when setting up an SAP system. when we talk about using AI or generating or AGI or generating certain certain things for prompts, what we are talking about are completions, chat completions, embeddings, so on and so forth, which is like up here on the top. That's just a tiny fraction of all the capabilities. So there is a whole bunch of setup, and then you use the AI engine. Now these setups and uploading files and so on and so forth may need more oversight, overview, or restrictions. It's not like everybody can go into the OS layer and then kind of fine tune the SAP installation, right? So that is where an enterprise control comes into picture, where, hey, setting up the AI systems may need some governance. Even using completions may need restrictions, maybe an authorization, so on and so forth. But we cannot generalize it. The problem here is we cannot generalize this rule, because these rules of governance are different from organization to organization, and they should be able to easily implement their own mechanism. But at the same time, if they don't want to implement a mechanism, it shouldn't be forced upon them as well, right? So that was a fine balance that we had going. And this, out of all that thought process, came this enterprise control, because AI SDK works on an enterprise system. So if you look at other libraries like Node.js, Python, etc., that works with OpenAI, you won't see this enterprise control as a feature, but rather this one is very specific to AI SDK because it is working on an enterprise system like SAP.
Yeah.
So with that said, what happens is, like in previous two discussions, we saw models, deployments, and so on and so forth with our demo programs. What we'll do now, hopefully, is like when we'll run a model demo program one more time, and then we'll use some parameters that we already have, and then we'll see that it works well. And then hopefully Murphy's Law, right? And then what we'll do is we'll turn on the enterprise control to deny pretty much everything, right? So we'll see that something is working, which is like allow everything, including models, and then we'll deny everything, and then we will create a small control program. So these two, like allow everything and deny everything, these are out of the box. Like, it is part of AI SDK. And then something in the middle is what we will create here as part of our hands-on, and then we'll use it in our implementation so that we can, and it'll be a very simple thing, but as we discuss, it can be used for more complex organization level controls. Hopefully that is something that is valuable. What do you think, Holger? Is that a
sounds perfect?
Okay,
absolutely.
Right. In that case, I'm right now in the system. Please let me know if you can see my SAP screen.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Beautiful SAP GUI.
Yes. So I'm going to my SC38 and the models demo program. And just to recap, when we are talking about different programs or demo programs, etc., if we go back to working with SDK and then in the models, we do have demo programs for OpenAI, Azure OpenAI, etc. So that is documented already. We discussed in detail about the availability of demo programs for each of these in one of our previous sessions. But that is the program for now that I'm running. Now, if I run this and I have a test data, and again, I'll rotate the key. Just for completeness, I'm showing the key, but we'll rotate the key after this session. If we look at our Azure resource, we have the keys and endpoint. Again, we discussed this before, and this is the key that we are using for now. All right, with all that done, I'm going to execute this. And as we can see, it breaks at the breakpoint. And remember, this is a demo program.
Yep.
We do get the list of models. Right now, I have about 49 models that are available, and all these are working perfectly well. All right. So And then I have a model detail that I'm also getting. Everything seems to be working very well, right? So I'm going to do, okay. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn on an enterprise control without changing anything in the code, right? Like, we saw the code work. I'm going to turn on enterprise control, but this time I'm going to say, let's deny every operation for AI SDK, including models, right? So no code change, but through configuration, we are going to deny any operation for AI SDK. This is where the enterprise control kind of kicks in and then say, okay, let's look at each operation that is about to happen. Let's reference this enterprise control. Am I permitted to do this? And if yes, let's go ahead and do it. So what you just saw as being like, list of models and things like that, internally, it is doing all this. It's just that right now, by default, it is allowed. But the moment we say it is not allowed, it kind of kicks in and then restricts this whole operation. Let's see that in action. So what I'm going to do is we have a transaction AI SDK profile. So I'm going to go there. And again, to reference what we are going to do, see this in the documentation, there is something called a default profile. That is what is being used by default by AI SDK. We will see how to change this and make sure that some other profiles are being used, so on and so forth. We'll do that. But the default profile is what we'll be working with. And what I'm going to do is to create a default profile and then deny all, which is kind of documented over here. So I'm going to copy this class name, going back to SAP GUI, and then I'm going to create a new entry. Again, default. It has to be this name default because that is for now the default profile. And I'm going to say deny every request or every operation. That includes models, deployments, so on and so forth. Okay, so it's a handler class. I'm going to save this. All right. Now with this, let's go ahead and execute that very same program one more time, the model program. I'm going to execute this. So at this point, we get a message saying that, okay, it's not permitted through the profile. Why? Because right now, the default profile prevents anything from happening. Like the deny all is blocking pretty much every operation from AI SDK. Why would we need all this, right? Like, why would somebody need a default profile to deny everything? And this is where we need to take a closer look at the initialization parameters of AI SDK. So when we go back to the documentation, when we say initializing, where is this? Working with this, initializing the SDK, I want to call attention to these two parameters that we had ignored till now. These are optional parameters. And if we don't provide this optional parameter called SDK profile, this is where the default profile we just saw is used internally, right? So now if a customer wants to enforce certain policies and they want to avoid using the default profile, what they can do is now you can turn off the default profile. So at this point, a user in that organization must provide an SDK profile. Without that, it will cease to work because you have denied the default profile anyways, right? So step number one is if there are restrictions that needs to be done, you have to force a profile to be provided. And that is why you can turn off the default profile so that for use of AI SDK, a profile can be explicitly specified. Right? So that's why we have this deny all. Now we can create a new profile handler and provide it a name so that that name can be provided in this SDK profile and then it kicks in. But for now, let me go ahead and then we'll create a handler class in the session through a code where we can then plug it into our default profile and see that the models work now, but everything else is kind of blocked. That will be our hands-on.
Perfect. But Gopal, I want to call out, I mean, what you did right now was in the same user context. So the very same user that set the profile was also the user that executed the program. I guess in a productive environment, these would be two different users. One who has the permissions to create the profile, and the other one who's the developer who uses the SDK and is stuck now with the profile basically.
Correct. And this is where the maintenance of this itself can be controlled by authorizations.
Exactly.
And so whoever is the config, this is not different from the configuration or the functional and the development and configuration, so on and so forth. So for example, a user can, or a super user or a security person can come here and then perform these restrictions or configurations. And this configuration is going to be respected by everybody who is using AI SDK in that system. And even sense. That, you don't have to open up the system in production and things like that. You can even restrict it by system ID. And this is where the sys ID, the middle parameter, comes into picture. If it is left blank, then it gets applied to pretty much every system. But if you want to kind of restrict it to say just the development system or just the production system, all you have to do is provide the system ID, and then it'll only implement this restriction or the default profile or the profile restriction in that system. So all those are built into AI SDK. Okay, with all that said, let's go ahead and then create a new handler. So what we are going to do is, with hands-on, is we are going to, so right now we saw deny all, pretty much block everything, right? We are going to create a new class with hands-on where we are going to allow some operations to continue, but some other operations to be blocked. So with that said, let's go ahead and first open up this deny all class and see the code in action. And then we will understand what the code is doing. I'm opening it, just a second. Okay, so here is the deny all class, the source code of deny all class. And as you can see, there are certain methods that gets called by AI SDK during runtime. One is during the start, second is during initialization, and third is during the perform operation. So in the perform operations, you have what is called a component type and the operation as two parameters. The component type for models is going to be, so let me go ahead and then set a breakpoint over here. And then we will see this in action, where what is happening when the model is getting initialized or called. Okay, and once we see it, from an ABAP perspective, we will have a hint on how to create our own class. So with that in mind, let me go ahead and open up the class in, let's exit out of here. I'm going to open up this class in SE24. And let's go ahead and then set a breakpoint over here in the initialize, and then perform operation. All right, with these, let's go ahead and run that demo program one more time. Okay, so I'm going to run this one more time with the same parameters. And as you can see,
breakpoint hits. Yep.
As it starts, it's calling this central control, or the deny all, and then saying, okay, hey, can I start the SDK? But here in our code, we are immediately raising an exception saying, no, it's denied, right? And the moment this thing is raising an exception, it comes back to the AI SDK core and then gives us that message saying, okay, you are prevented from even executing this. So let's go ahead and execute this. And then that is how this message comes to be. So to create a profile handler, what we are talking about here is deny all is a profile handler, as we saw in the configuration mechanism, right? So we are handling a profile in a particular way. To create a profile handler, and this is part of our documentation as well on how to create a profile handler, creating a new profile, it's explained here. But the way we create a new profile handler is to inherit from this class called ZZL-PENG-AZOI central control. So first we inherit from that, and then we override one of these methods. Now, if you want everything to be denied, then you can inherit from that deny all. If you want everything to be permitted, you can inherit from the central control. So you basically decide which place to get a start from, and then you go from there, right? So in this case, let's go ahead and create a new demo control, and then we will go ahead and kind of start restricting the model operation and so on and so forth. To that end, I'm going to go ahead and create a new class. So let me go ahead and create a new class here. New. So let's call it ZZL ENT control or demo ENTCTRL, right? And then demo enterprise control. And then what should be the superclass? As we see in the documentation, it should be ZZL-PNG central control. So I'm going to copy that class and then make it the superclass of this thing. All right. So now, with this inheritance, what I can do is now I can plug in this class name to our configuration. So we just created a class. It inherited from the central control. Now I'm going to make this our default profile handler. Okay. So I'm going to go back to the default profile and then put in this class name, central control or enterprise control. So at this point, since we inherited from that central control, which allows everything, we shouldn't be seeing any difference, right? So let's validate that. I'm going to go ahead and execute. Let me just go ahead and do this. All right. So I'm going to execute this one more time. We have changed the configuration. This time, what should happen? It should work because we haven't restricted anything. We just changed the from deny all to a custom profile handler, but that custom profile handler is inheriting from allow all, and we haven't changed anything, so it should allow everything. So that's what we are doing now. And as we see, it hit the breakpoint, and we can see the model list without any problems. Everything seems to be working as expected. Now, with all this done, let's go ahead and change the code in this to start denying for only model operation, right? So to that end, I'm going to go back to the code and going to say, so I'm going to do a redefinition of these methods, right? Or like not start SDK, but like, this perform operation. Let's go ahead and do that. Here I'm in the public section of this enterprise control, and I'm just performing a redefinition, and I'm going to use the implementation. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to set a breakpoint under perform operation. And see how this reacts, like, what is going on. So earlier we had denied it right at the start SDK, initialize SDK component, we had denied it. But right now I'm just going to create a breakpoint inside the perform operation so that start SDK component, etc. can kind of work without any restriction. And then we will hit a breakpoint at this perform operation. And what we are going to do is to review the parameters that are coming in that perform operation to view how everything is working. And by the way, in the start SDK, if we look at the signature, the initialization parameters are provided over here: API version, API base, API type, so on and so forth. So for example, if you want to restrict the use of AI SDK only to a specific API version, or a specific API type, or a specific way in which you authenticate, for example, not key based, but AAD based, so on and so forth. All those can be achieved by start SDK restrictions. But in this case, what we are interested in, irrespective of how that authentication and all those things are happening, we just want to restrict for models is what we are again. So for that, we are going to see the perform operation, review the perform operation. If we look at this, there is a component type and component operation, right? So what we are going to do is we are going to review this component type, and then based on the component type, we are going to deny model operation, model get operation. So, but before that, let's go ahead and see if it hits the breakpoint. To do that, I'm going to just execute this program one more time. All right. So this time, because the handler we had changed, it hits just the perform operation, and the component. So when we are reviewing the parameters, so remember the parameter names, component type, and operation, right? So we are going to see what component type this is, and it says model, right? And then operation, which is a list. Why is this happening? If we look at the stack, this call is coming from here. Where we are looking at the model list, and this is what is eventually getting into the enterprise control to say this is a model operation and this is a listing operation. So let's say we want to deny this model listing mechanism. What I'm going to do is simply to create the code in there, and we're making it very simple here, but like, it can go as complex, like maybe a real implementation, maybe which user is doing this, which do they have a security role, so on and so forth. You can make it as complex or like, as needed based on what the organization policies are. But for now, here we are simply going to say if what was the parameter again? I forgot. Component type equals model. Then, so what do? We simply, if we look at the deny all, we simply raise this exception, right? So let's say we raise this exception for model. All right. So I'm going to activate this. And this time, so for models, it's now going to say, no, you're not permitted to kind of progress. So let's go ahead and then execute it one more time. Debugging.
The debugger is still,
So now let's rerun that program. And as you can see, at this point, that restriction
Exception
got hit,
is raised, yeah.
and the exception is raised. This is a very simple profile handler, right? Where we are in a blanket state way restricting the model. But if you do this very same thing for, let's say, the completions. So I'm going to let's say do the demo completion program, right?
And that should now work without problems because we were only limiting the listing, the lookup of the models.
Yes.
Completion should still work.
It works without any restrictions because we have only restricted the model. But if we now go ahead and then restrict it by completions, this will also stop. So it depends on, maybe it is a company policy that an organization policy that the users who are using this should have a particular authorization or auth role in their user. That can be implemented using ABAP code, using auth checks, so on and so forth. Whatever is the mechanism that they use for restrictions, that can be implemented in this profile handler, and that profile handler can be attached to either the default profile, or you can deny everything on the default profile and then force them to use a new profile and handle it that way. All these are possible, and all these mechanisms are documented well in this enterprise control feature, how to create the profile handler, how to kind of configure it, so on and so forth. That's what I wanted to kind of like share at this point.
So basically, there is a full, deep, fine granularity what you can control it. Or basically, you can control everything, so to say, who and what can do or cannot do from users, from actions.
Correct. Internally, AI SDK uses a component model, like, where we spin up these components like models, deployments, all these are realized as components internally. It is it is made very simple for usage for the end user, but internally, that is how the components are kind of spun up. And during these spinning up processes, it is basically consulting this profile mechanism to say, hey, can I spin up? Can I come into existence? Are there any restrictions that I had to be worried about? And then based on that feedback from the controller of the profile controller, that's when it spins up or shuts down and so on and so forth. That architecture allows us to have a fine granularity, as you said, Goran, based on even initialization, specific components, not just specific components, but specific operations within components, so on. So that gives us a very, very strong granularity in terms of what we can control in terms of restricting and implementing enterprise control.
I think
all is built in the SDK.
Sorry?
All is built in the SDK.
Yes, it is all part of AI SDK because it is working in our target environment is an enterprise system. And as we all know, an enterprise system is we need to be very mindful about what we can expose, and also should play well with an organization policy, because a lot of data is available, right? Or in an enterprise system. So we should be careful about and responsible with the data and the policies.
Now that's really cool, and it was impressive to see how easy it actually is to get started, to start then writing, simple if statements in the end to control this. So I think that's a really powerful model that can help companies to create complex profiles as well, and to really limit and restrict what is possible and what the developers can do.
Right. Really nice. And that was the goal too, because if we were to make it too complex, the problem is it can introduce bugs or issues. And second is people will be turned off from using it, right? We wanted to have a balance, or a mechanism by which by default it is available, turned off. But at the same time, if you want it, it is right there and easy to implement. So to your point, so that people can really use it without spending hours and hours even figuring out how to do it kind of thing. Hopefully, we have made it simple enough.
Yeah.
Great.
Perfect. Cool, Gopal. Thanks for this overview. I think the fact alone that we have this functionality in the AI SDK already shows the vision of having really an enterprise-ready AI SDK, and I think that's really nice to see that you're helping the ABAP developer to consume the AI services in a more easier way, but at the same time already think how can this be done in an enterprise context. And I think that's, I mean, coming from a Microsoft IT background, basically. So how can we do it in our own company, basically, and then really helping the customers to do it by themselves? I think that's really fantastic.
Thank you. Thank you.
So thank you, Gopal. I think that's for now the conclusion of our 3-part series, but I'm sure you'll come up with some new things, and then we'll have you back to continue the story about AI and ABAP, most likely.
Thank you, Holger. And AI field is changing so fast. Like, even last week, there was the dev conference from OpenAI where lots of new features were introduced, and Azure OpenAI has a lot of new features and things like that. As these features are introduced, there is always this learning curve for even like AI SDK for developing or putting that features into AI SDK. There is that learning curve first, and once that learning curve is achieved, we want to make sure that when some feature is introduced in AI SDK, it is of high quality, not like a very frickle one. So sometimes it takes some time to kind of make it way into AI SDK, but once it does, hopefully it is a high quality and things like that. So that's what we are shooting for. As new features gets introduced, it'll eventually make its way into AI SDK.
Perfect.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. We'll see each other again.
All right.
Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.